So I'm Mike Edelson, New York Historical Fencing Association. This is a lecture on HEMA as a martial art. Now, what does HEMA stand for? Right. So this should not be like, what's that word? Controversial. This should not be controversial. This should be, go ahead, grab a seat. This should be something that's intuitive. This should be something we all understand. The problem is, we don't. And even if we think we do. And as some of you know, I myself have always been a big proponent of, martial art, martial art, martial art. So I decided to do a class or lecture about it at Fexual, New York. And I did some research for it. When I started doing research, I realized that holy shit, there are things that I actually did not consider, right? As far as what it means to study HEMA as a martial art. It's more like you have a bunch of these thoughts, and when you put them all together, the picture they reveal can sometimes be surprising. So I think that's what happened to me, and it's changed the way that we do a lot of things. In a way, we went back to the way HEMA was, for us at least, before 2011, which is when the tournaments made the big push, or we're starting to anyway. And we're also going to start doing some new things that we recently started trying, but it's going to be a transition. So I'm hoping that you guys can benefit from this in the same way that we have. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how swords and other similar weapons in the Middle Ages, because we only care about League Towers, KDF, right? We don't care about anything else like Meyer, Fiore, that's nonsense, right? I'm just kidding. That's actually not true. We do care about Fiore because he's from the same period. But how are these weapons used in the Middle Ages, right? So first we have the obvious ones, right? Combat and war. And why I separate the two, because you have combat and war, right? But not all combat is war. You can have combat somewhere else, right? You can attack like your neighbor's homestead and jack them up, right? That's combat, but it's not really war. I mean, it could be. Anyway, moving on. Self-defense, or any kind of defense, right? Not necessarily of you. So, a bodyguard, right? Like, I'm a rich dude. I want to travel with my rich dude caravan down my rich dude highway, right, to my rich girlfriend's house, right? So we can do rich things together. I hire bodyguards, right? And these bodyguards would use medieval weapons to protect me from other people with medieval weapons who want to go medieval on me, right? Hunting, that's an obvious thing, right? Bows and arrows, right? Spears, even some swords. Like, for example, this sword, right, is a hunting weapon, right? I mean, well, this is not the best example, but this would be used, for example, to dispatch a boar after you shanked it with a spear, right? Dueling, right? Judicial dueling, not so judicial dueling. Basically, two people deciding that we hate each other, we want to jack each other up, let's do this, but it's organized, right? They show up at dawn, they have seconds, and then they fight. Recreation, right? So there's a lot of stuff written in the various sources that we have about how fencing is like, good for the soul, how it makes you happy and healthy, and all that kind of stuff, right? It's exercise, and exercise, as we know, is like a good treatment for depression, right? Recreation, fitness, exercise, they tie it together. Competition, right? Everyone wants to see who has the biggest sword, right? So they compete, and the person who wins has the biggest sword, and so on and so forth. Competition has existed in all of our cultures since the dawn of time, right? Some form of competition. It still exists today. Business, right? For-profit teaching. I'm pretty good with a sword. I'm going to open up a school. I'm going to teach people. I'm going to charge them money, right? I'm going to use that money to buy beer and beer, right? Now, where did these weapons come from? It's very important to look at that. So the origin for all weapons, every single one, is either hunting or killing people, right? So the origin of the spear is hunting, right? The origin of the bow and arrow is hunting. The origin of the sword, I think, is actually one of the few, if not the only weapon that originated for actually dealing with people, right? For combat. All right, click. Okay, how do we practice HEMA today, right? So we've got academic research, which, I mean, there were academic stuff, academic stuff going on back in the Middle Ages, but they weren't doing the same thing we're doing. They weren't trying to recreate something that was lost, right? So we have that. Exercise, fitness, competition, sport, we do all that stuff today, right? Recreation is supposed to be fun, right? Supposed to be for most of you, right? Longpoint's fun, yes? Okay.
Hey, Longpoint.
Fitness, exercise, I did that, I have to repeat it twice. Oh, okay.
What's the difference? That's because it's
because exercise is important, right, yeah. You need to fit, get swole. I have competition twice. Okay, this is what happens when I copy and paste. Again, we have business, teaching for profit, right? We still have that going on, which is fine because people should be compensated for their work. And what's missing, right? There's a bunch of stuff missing. So click. All right, let's. The problem with analyzing what's going on is that swords today really don't exist as serious weapons. I mean, you've got guys running around, with these things, hacking each other apart sometimes. But swords today are basically, they're in museums, they're in people's walls, they're at Longpoint, right? They're not like the weapon of the day. Guns, on the other hand, are interesting to us for this lecture because guns exist in both capacities today, right? Guns exist as serious weapons. They're the weapons of our time, right? They also exist in other uses like competition, recreation, hunting, that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is undertake a little thought experiment. Now, we don't have to play this game where you pretend to be archaeologists in the future. That's like, I know there's like Dungeons & Dragons players here, so if you guys want to play that role character, your name is Indiana Bones. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare how people train with guns today to how we train with swords and other medieval weapons, and we're going to see what we can learn from that. A lot of this is very longsword centric, because longsword is the most popular weapon, it's my favorite, but really this can apply to pretty much any medieval weapon. Click. All right, so how are guns used in 2017, right? Combat, war, defense. This is all familiar, right? Because this is copy-pasted from the previous list. Now, isn't that interesting? Guns are used exactly the same way today as these weapons were used back then, right? Is there anything on what? So again, this list is just copy-pasted with the words "look familiar" added, right? And that's important to us because we have just drawn a comparison, and it should be pretty interesting. Like, whoa, maybe I never thought of that. That guns today are completely analogous to medieval weapons or swords. Click. Now, let's look at a medieval longsword specifically, right? Something like this. And what modern weapon, before we click, does anyone have a guess as to what modern weapon is analogous to the medieval longsword?
Handgun.
Okay, we've got handgun, rifle.
Assault rifle.
Okay, click.
This one.
Okay, click again. Now, why the handgun, right? Because the sword is not, at least the longsword, is not the primary weapon of a soldier. It is the sidearm. It is the heavy-duty sidearm, right? It's not the little pocket pistol, right? It's not like some little carry piece. It's your big, full-size service weapon, right? That you carry in your big, uncomfortable open holster, right? And these things are not the most comfortable swords to carry. To wear as compared to, for example, something like this, although this is not typical medieval scabbard. So, click. Oh, actually, before we do that, are there any questions about why the handgun is analogous to the longsword?
Actually, more of a question. Why wouldn't it be more like a rifle?
Because a rifle is a primary weapon of an infantry soldier. So a longsword is not really a primary weapon, right? You don't charge into battle with your longsword, you do it with your spear, your halberd, or whatever, and your longsword is on your side. Okay? Now Romans, for example, are an exception. There are exceptions. Romans use but that wasn't a longsword, so on and so forth. It's, by the way, some people say, well, it's like a knife, right? You know what's analogous to a medieval knife? A modern knife. All right, click. This is the most common tool used in the practice of HEMA today, right? The Federschwert, or whatever you want to call it, right? Now, what is analogous to this in modern times? Because this is a weapon a tool that was used in period 2, right? In the Middle Ages, not exactly like this. Go ahead.
Like an airsoft gun?
There we go. Yeah. Now, it doesn't have to be airsoft. It could be paintball, it could be simunitions, right? But airsoft is more interesting to us. Click. Okay. Before we continue, let's make sure we understand this. So the longsword is click again, that, click again, and click, click, click. Okay, everybody gets that, right? Click. Okay, now, the interesting thing about airsoft guns, right, is that kids use them to play games, right? But professionals, especially like police departments on a budget, who can't afford simunitions, use them as serious force-on-force training tools, right? So that's why I picked airsoft, because that actually has an interesting connotation for us, because we get to study the differences in how these groups train, right? Now, who's not familiar with modern airsoft guns? Okay, so when I did this lecture at Effectual New York, I had a real gun and an airsoft gun, and I compared the two. An airsoft gun is made of metal, quality one. Obviously, you can buy a cheap one for $10. It's like see-through plastic, right? but it's made of metal and plastic like a real gun. The slide articulates like a real gun. It fires with a blowback action, so the compressed air makes the slide reciprocate, load the next little plastic BB and shoots it again. It's scale modeled to a specific firearm, and usually the good ones from Japan are licensed. It's like Beretta will license their 92, whatever, and it'll be an exact replica. It'll have the exact same controls. Some very few weapons, actually you can interchange some of the parts. People don't recommend it because the parts in airsoft guns are crap, right? Because they're not meant to withstand the recoil of various forces. But that's how close they are. Okay. So it looks like the real weapon. It simulates the real weapon, but it doesn't kill you unless you bash someone over the head with it until they die, which makes it very similar to a fetter, right? Okay. Click. All right. Now, why do we care about this? So I mentioned before that guns are used both in real-world fighting, hunting, whatever, and also back home for recreation, sport, sitting around talking bullshit at a bar, right? That kind of thing, just like swords. So again, we are going to take a look at how kids play with airsoft guns, or adults, because adults play these games too, and how professionals train. Click. Okay, so let's look at how a professional unit would train with airsoft guns. And if you're having a hard time picturing a bunch of military or police guys training with airsoft guns, you can substitute simunitions for this, right? Because if we didn't have a bunch of silly laws, people would be playing with simunitions instead of airsoft. Does anyone not know what simunitions are? Simunition is you take a handgun, a real one, put a slightly different barrel in it, take a cartridge, a bullet, take out the lead part that kills you, put in a little chalk thing covered in plastic, and reduce the amount of gunpowder. Okay, when you get shot with them, they hurt. Not like so much that you're like, ah, but it hurts. I've been shot with it a bunch of times. It's unpleasant, okay? But it's not so unpleasant that if it wasn't for laws, we wouldn't have them. So let's forget airsoft and focus on simunitions, because that's more. All right, so professionals only use them, and this is important, to simulate a specific weapon, right? So for example, if you're a military unit and your issue is the M4 carbine and the M9? The M9 is the handgun, right? The M9 handgun, right? You get an airsoft M4 carbine, or simunitions M4 carbine, and a simunitions Beretta handgun, right? And it is exactly like your real weapons. They function like the weapons. Simunitions weigh exactly like the weapons do. The airsoft doesn't, but some of them can be close. So it's a simulation of a specific weapon. Is a fetter a simulation of a specific weapon? No. Right? Okay. So something they do, for example, with airsoft guns, right? Airsoft guns, the magazines can hold, let's say, 40 little BBs, right? But the weapon it's simulating can only hold, let's say, 15, right? So a kid playing a game would load 40 BBs in there, right? Because he wants to win, right? He's exploiting the characteristic of the training tool. Whereas a professional will only load 15, okay? Because that's what the real one does. And he wants to train for his realistic round kill. Professionals practice realistic risk avoidance, right? So for example, let's say we're a bunch of kids playing with either airsoft or simunitions, and our goal is to overwhelm the bunch of kids on the other side of the play area, right? So we have 40 kids and they have 10 kids. Fuck it, we're just going to get up and gang bum rush them, right? A bunch of us are going to get shot, but we don't care. We're going to shoot and we're going to win. That's not realistic risk avoidance, right?
Sounds like an Marine.
Well, I mean, unless you're a Marine, sorry. Good point. But that's not something a professional would do, right? They practice realistic risk avoidance because even though the game they're playing isn't dangerous, right? If you get shot in the face, you're wearing a plastic, face shield. If you get shot in the face with a simunition or an airsoft, nothing's going to happen to you. It's going to be like, oh, I got shot in the face, right? So if you're just playing a game, it doesn't matter. But if you're training for reality, you wouldn't do that, right? So they set realistic goals, right? So for example, kids might play capture the flag, right? Whereas a military unit might say, hostage rescue. Or target elimination, right? Person of interest capture, things like that. They're realistic, real-world goals, right? Not capture the flag. Now, sometimes kids might do hostage rescue, but they're going to do it wrong, right? Because they don't know the various details of what goes on and what is involved in a hostage rescue. Okay, so weapon deployment, transitions, and shooting when wounded, right? So a professional unit will focus very heavily on how they wear their weapons, right? So, a military unit would be inserted into an area, right? And they would have to be inserted with all of their gear arranged a certain way so that they could get to it, right? Like, their handgun would be holstered, their spare magazines are in certain pouches, right? And different units have different standards. Some let you do whatever you want. Some say that this must be here, this must be there, this must be exactly there. If not, you get smacked in the face, right? So these kind of things are important. Using your weapon from a sling, right? Transitioning from one weapon to another. All right, so for example, your carbine runs dry. Do you reload the magazine, or do you drop it and transition to your sidearm and continue shooting until you get to a cover or whatever? These are all different depending on whether you're military, police, whether you're a special forces unit, a recon unit, or whatever. It's all different, but the point is they practice these specific things, right? That the kids who play airsoft either don't think about or do wrong because it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Teamwork and team interaction, right? So a military or police unit has a chain of command, right? There's certain people who are in charge of certain things. They all need to work as a cohesive unit, right? Kids playing games, bomb rush, right? And again, sometimes they do this, but they do it wrong because they don't spend long, long hours training this. They're not professionals, right? Critical decision-making skills, like, shoot, don't shoot, right? When do I shoot? When do I not shoot, right? Do we move on the hostage, or do we hold back because the hostage's life would be in danger if we move too soon, right? That's why I said kids who play like hostage rescue would do it wrong. They're like, oh, there's a hostage, let's go get him, right? They don't think about, well, if we get him now, right, they might kill him, but if we wait till that guy takes a shit, then, we could take him out of the bathroom and then move in, and the other guys might not be able to get to the hostage in time, things like that. Also, deliberate simulation of stress, right? When kids or adults play airsoft games, they don't want to be stressed, they're there to have fun, right? Whereas a military unit would know that in a real situation, you're going to be under severe stress. So in training, you want to simulate that stress to a certain extent, right? And then various units have different ways of dealing with that. Command structure, which is similar to team interaction, but these are things that are important to professionals, not to children. Rules of engagement, right? In an airsoft game, you just kill the other dudes, right? If you're capturing the flag, shoot all the other dudes, but in a real situation, you may not be able to engage until certain conditions are met, right? These are things professionals do, kids don't. Lethal versus non-lethal tactics, right? When do you kill? When do you not kill? You can't just kill everyone you see, right? All right, so, and we're comparing it to how the kids play. Right, we've got basically everything I said before. They do not usually own real versions of these weapons, right? They train to use the toys rather than the actual weapons. They load their magazines full. They get the lightest ones possible. They change their batteries to shoot faster, all this kind of stuff. They practice minimal risk avoidance. Now here we're going to insert a HEMA equivalent. How many people know it's a valid competition strategy? I don't know how you fight, so I'm going to let you hit me a couple of times, or at least take some risks, see what you do. That's okay, because I'm going to beat you up now that I know how you fight. I figured out your tricks, I'm going to defeat you. Is that something you do in a fight? I'm going to let him stab me in the neck, right, and then I'm going to figure out how he fights so that I could kill him, right? I mean, this is pretty obvious. They don't train weapon deployment transitions, or at least not while serious. Another thing I skipped over before is use while injured, right? So a professional would train shooting with both hands, shooting with only this hand when this one gets shot off, or shooting only with this hand, right? Maybe shooting with their mouth. No, I just made that up.
Or carrying your Marine Corps buddy over your shoulder.
Yeah, okay, that kind of stuff. They have some teamwork, like your team captain, sure, whatever, but nobody listens to you, right? They don't care about that kind of stuff. No deliberate stress, decision-making doesn't really matter. The goals are unrealistic, no rules of engagement. There's no distinction in lethal and non-lethal because nobody dies, okay? Click. All right, now which of those are we when we fence? Does anybody want to answer that? Which of those are we, the kids or the pros?
The kids.
We're the kids, right? And these are a bunch of the things that we're missing, right? So we had that list before, we discussed it before, click. Okay, so these are some of the training analogs that we have today, click. So this is a person training to use her actual duty weapon, right? And this is on a target, right? There could be moving targets, right? Static targets, it doesn't matter. And this is analogous to click and click. All right? Okay? Yeah. I had to use like license-free images, so I have your permission, right?
Yeah, but
Okay. So that's shooting or practicing using the weapon is analogous to learning how to use a weapon in cutting, right? Click. And this is a force-on-force exercise with a simunitions gun. This is actually a joint Air Force police training exercise. And click, and click. So that's analogous to fencing. Only, not really. Click again. Okay? Now, this scenario on the left has a whole bunch of things going on, right? They're training a specific scenario, whereas the people on the right are just training who's the better fighter, right? Now, yes, that is a realistic thing. Like if I'm walking down the street and you jump out and say, hey, I'm better than you, fuck you, or take out your sword and we fight. That's a realistic scenario. But it's really the only scenario we train, right? These guys also train, like what happens if two dudes walk into a room, which one of them gets the other one first, right? But that's only one of thousands of various scenarios that they train, right? We don't. Click. So tournaments, right? We have our tournaments. So before tournaments came along, people kind of sucked, right? You had a bunch of people posting in forums, right? And whoever posted the best was the big name in the HEMA community, right? Or the WMA community, as it was called back then in the US. And people, you know, their fencing was right? And then tournaments came along and they brought people together and they kept upping the degree of skill, and that was a good thing, right? So pressure testing tournaments are a valuable tool. You can't not do this. You can't not pressure test your technique, all right? Or else it becomes stagnant, right? It becomes weak. You never know whether you're any good or not because, well, it's just you bullshitting on the internet. Tournaments offer us a fantastic opportunity that we should absolutely take advantage of. But they're only a subset of martial skill. Now it says here that they only test 2 phases of the fight. We're going to learn what that is in a little bit. But they test a very limited subset of martial skill. Like if you go out there and you get creamed by some guy, does that mean that he's an actual better fighter than, not fencer, he's probably a better fencer than you, but is he a better fighter than you?
No.
Not, I mean, he could be, right? He's obviously good, right? He might be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Tournaments are full of training artifacts, which we're going to look at some of these. All right, does anyone know what a training artifact is? Does everyone not know what a training artifact is? All right, so a training artifact would be like, for example, in my glove, I can only turn my hand this much as opposed to this much, right? So when I train a technique, when I'm training in gear, I'm teaching my body this muscle memory of only turning this much, which means I now have to move my body to compensate, right? I mean, this is a silly example, but the point is that, think about that, right? You train into your muscle memory what are the wrong techniques, because you are limited by certain things that come from these artifacts. And that's something that cannot be avoided. I'm not saying tournaments are wrong because they have artifacts. You can't avoid training artifacts. The stuff our ancestors did in the Middle Ages had training artifacts. The difference is they knew what they were. Okay? I had this thing I said on Facebook once. People seem to like it. Tournaments are like water. Okay? You need it, but too much of it is pretty bad. Right? Alright, so as we just mentioned, competition existed in the Middle Ages. Recreational fencing existed in the Middle Ages. But people knew the difference, right? Just like guns today, right? There's all kinds of recreational uses. Do you ever see like a competition? Does anyone follow competition shooting? Do you? Who's your favorite competition shooter?
Me.
Who's your favorite, not you, competition shooter?
Probably a 6-hour shooting team.
Alright, did these guys ever confuse themselves for professional military? Or
No.
professional shooters, right? No, right? Like one of the best shooters in the world is Rob Latham, right? Has anybody ever heard of him? This guy's freaking amazing. He'll be the first to tell you what he's playing is a game, right? He knows that. Now he teaches the military how to shoot, right? But he knows that they only take certain things from him, like how to use their weapons better, not how to play the shooting game, because that's of no interest to them, right? In competition, when you shoot, you're trying to shoot like targets really fast, whatever. Every shot that you fire in a real situation has to have an element of decision making, right? So that's one big difference. And these guys all know the difference because, you know, there's a real need for weapons today, firearms today. And if you do it wrong, you die. All right, so no one's going to walk around claiming to be, you know, the greatest gunfighter in the world because they're going to not live very long. And in the Middle Ages, it was the same thing. They knew the difference, right? So they were able to deploy this type of competitive fencing that didn't really detract from their skill, but helped it because they knew how to use these artifacts, how to channel these artifacts, and how to make the most of it. They actually had a way of fencing that we don't use, that we'll talk about later. Click. Okay, now, when I talked about this stuff in the past, one of the common answers I had from people was, I'm not a sport fencer, because I use real techniques from the sources in my sport fencing. Okay, excuse me. Sorry. So, what does that mean? Does that, after everything you've heard right now, do you agree with that statement? That just because you use techniques from the sources, you are not sport fencing?
Not true.
It's kind of ridiculous, right? I mean, you know, épée and foil fencing, they use those same techniques, right? Disengage is like a deflect them, right? I mean, it's all the same stuff. Obviously, the weapon's different, everything's a little different, but it's the same stuff. So then, you know, what's missing? What's missing from my sport fencing? Click. Well, that's one thing. Daggers. So in the Middle Ages, everybody had a dagger. Okay, well, not everybody, right? There was like slaves and really poor people who were like begging in the street. But I mean, everybody who wasn't one of those people had a dagger, okay? A dagger like this. This is a pretty decent reproduction of a period rondel dagger, and rondels are these round things. What they do is they keep your hand from sliding onto the blade when you're shanking people. Okay? And that's primarily what these weapons were used for. A lot of them were long. A lot of them didn't even, some of them didn't even have edges, right? They were kind of like ice picks. Because the best way to kill someone with a knife is not to slash them up. Has anyone ever seen like knife fights where people are not stabbing but slashing? They could be doing it for hours, right? And then they all go to the hospital and they're all like slashed to hell and they'll be in bed for months, but they're alive, right? If you want to kill someone with a knife, you stab them, right? So that's what these are for. And this is kind of long, so you know, if I stab from here, I get to something important, right? If I stab from here, I get to something important. If I stab here, I get to something important, right?
Arguably.
Come over here. So, if someone were to be fighting with a sword in the year 1417, right, or whatever, pick an arbitrary year, they would be wearing one of these, probably on their right side or wherever. That's where you mostly see it in period illustrations and stuff. Do we wear daggers when we fence?
Artificial.
That's actually pretty close to what I'm talking about, right? But out there, right, we don't wear daggers when we fence. When you fence in your clubs, your schools, whatever, do you wear daggers?
Usually not.
You be quiet, because you're us, right? Yeah, we actually have started wearing daggers. We've been doing it for a little while. We used to do this, New York Historical Fencing Association, around 2010 and before. We used to wear daggers. Not all the time, but we did it a lot. And when we would enter grappling range, right, if we didn't have a decisive immediate grapple, we would pull out the dagger and shank, right? And it's very, like, pleasing. Like when you, oh, it's like, it's cathartic. So, if we don't wear daggers, you know what else we don't do? We don't train transitioning from sword to dagger, right? So what does that sound more like? Again, we're closer to the kids, right? Although the kids actually wear handguns sometimes when they use rifles, right? So the kids are better than us, the airsoft kids, right? But we don't wear a dagger, we don't train transitions, okay? So that's bad, right? That's something martial that's missing from our fencing. If you were training a martial art in the year, what did I pick, 14 whatever, right? You would learn how to use a dagger. You would wear a dagger. Children wore daggers. Children, okay? This modern society of ours is actually pretty unique in history because we are a disarmed society, right? We live in a society where someone could walk into a bar or a nightclub or whatever with a stupid rifle, a glorified varmint gun, right, an AR-15, and kill 100 people while they all cower and run like crazy. In the year 1392, right, if I walked into a bar with a sword and said, I'm going to kill you, people would be like... And, you know, one guy with a dagger is not going to succeed against one guy with a sword, but you have 100 of you, right, or whatever many there are. I'm going to die. All right, so that didn't happen. We are a disarmed society. They were not. They wore these, right? Obviously not small children and not all children. Maybe some poor people... Actually, I don't even know. I think even poor people had daggers of some kind. I mean, this was a thing that you had to have.
a knife.
A knife, some kind of knife, right? You would have a knife. Everybody had to have a knife. I mean, it was inconceivable to be... well, that's like sometimes you actually have like an eating knife in either a sword scabbard or a knife scabbard, but it would be inconceivable for most people to walk around without a means of defending their own life, right? And they realize that this is not the greatest weapon. If you pull out a sword and I pull out this, I'm pretty much screwed, right? But at least I have a chance, okay? Click. Real weapons, right? Now a lot of us are starting to own real weapons because some asshole got people started in cutting in HEMA, and so now people are buying swords, right? We own real weapons, but do we train with them? Some of us do, but most of us don't, all right? Or at least not very often. And by train with them, I mean take them out 10, 15 minutes a day and cut air, right? Listening for that sound of edge alignment. Does anyone not know what the sound of good edge alignment is? Okay, good. At least everybody knows that. And it's not just swords, right? Like for example, some of you I bet after this lecture will go out and buy like those plastic or rubber cold steel training daggers. Oh, I wish I brought one.
I can grab one.
Is it like nearby?
Yeah.
It's nearby. But are you also going to buy one of these, right? You have your fetters, but do you also have a matching sharp sword? Maybe if you want to study this as a martial art, you should. And what I want to stress is there is absolutely nothing wrong with just being into competitive fencing for that kind of fencing sake. There's nothing wrong with it. Swords are useless today, right? I mean, pretty much. You might grab one and defend yourself. It happens, it's in the news, right? But it's in the news because it's an oddity. It doesn't happen every day, right? But for the most part, swords are useless. So there's nothing wrong with competitive fencing. But if you want to study HEMA as a martial art, you have to do more than just say, I study HEMA as a martial art. And one of those things is do the things that we're talking about. Get a dagger, right? Get one of those training daggers. Get a sharp weapon. If you want to study poleaxe, the first thing you should buy is not a rubber poleaxe and smack each other in the face with it. It should be that thing right there, right? An actual poleaxe. Click. Okay. So one of the reasons you need to, yes. So this is the cold steel. This is an excellent rubber training dagger. It's, can you come here for a second? So pretend you have a dagger, right? And just go. Pretend you have a dagger, right? So come down and stab me, so I'll block you here. So this is stiff enough to do some of the techniques like that, right, that they had in the dagger, okay? But, thank you. It's flexible enough that, you know, if you stab someone, especially in HEMA gear with a padded jacket, it's not going to hurt that much. And the thing is, like grappling situation, you don't really have to stab someone hard, right? It's just to show that I could have shanked you if I wanted to, right? So, and these are cheap. These are like
15
12, 15 bucks, 14, 15 bucks shipped, right? On Amazon, I think last time it was like $14.95 Amazon Prime. What? Oh, Natasha sells them. How much do you sell them for?
They're 16.
16, but then you don't have to wait for shipping. So that's better, right? So we can have it right. Actually, she probably has a ton of them. Go get it, okay?
Yay.
And the green ones are better.
If you have a weapon, right, you need to practice weapon deployment. If I'm walking around, right, the streets of medieval, whatever, right? Medieval West Bubblefuck, right? I'm walking around the streets with a longsword, and someone jumps me, and they're about to kill me, right? And I go, and I can't get it out, right? What good is this thing? If I can't deploy this effectively, what good is it, right? But do you train how to deploy this weapon? We don't, right? Well, I mean, some people don't. Can you get, even if you can get it out, can you get it out fast enough, right? Can you get it out under stress? What happens under stress? Their fingers get clumsy, right? Has anyone ever been on a life or death struggle where your fingers get like clumsy and you start feeling dizzy and all that stuff, right? So that kind of stuff happens. Now, when that happens, you revert to muscle memory, right? So if you have to train deploying that weapon, because if you think, well, I can pull a sword out of a scabbard, it's easy, right? And you're right, it is. It's easy to pull a sword out of a scabbard. Kind of not so much when it's dangling down here, right? However, even if it's easy, when your fingers start getting fumbly, if you don't have the muscle memory, you're not going to be able to do it. You can do anything under stress. You can play the piano under stress if you have the muscle memory. Okay? Without the muscle memory, you're a klutz, you're going to drop things, it's all over. You know when you don't need to worry about deploying your weapon? Sport fencing, because you start with it in your hand, right? If you start with a weapon in your hand, it's not a martial art. It's a part of a martial art, but it's not, if you don't train how to deploy a weapon, it's not a martial art. Play. Okay, now some people might be saying, what is this crazy man talking about, right? There's no Iaido in HEMA. Does anyone know what Iaido is? It's the Japanese art of drawing and cutting the sword, right? That doesn't exist in HEMA, right? I'm making all this crap up, right? Click. Oh, really? Click. What's that? Click. Scabbard, draw, cut, click. Fiori. But drawing the weapon, click. Messer, right? Click. And various other Italian nonsense, right? So, there is the Iaido in HEMA, okay? The art of drawing, or it's not an art, they don't look at it the same way, but the practice of drawing, cutting from the draw, defending yourself from the draw, that existed in our sources. And if we're going to do this as a martial art, we need to do that, right? Again, if you can't get your weapon out of the scabbard, if you're training on resolve, getting your weapon out of the scabbard and using it, it's not a martial art. Click. All right, the other thing is, understand how your weapon works. Right, now these slides are showing tests of various weapons that we did, I think 2008 or 9. To figure out what these things are capable of doing. So some of the things we learned are that layered jacks, which is a type of armor consisting of 20 and 30 layers of linen, was very effective against cuts. Pretty effective against thrusts, but not so much. The other thing we learned is that poleaxes destroy everything they hit. So, like for example, a medieval knight in a full plate harness, which is the word for plate armor, you know, especially if it's hardened, he would be almost completely invulnerable to swords. If you look at harness session in the art of fighting, it's not going bang, 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 gone, right? It's about, you know, getting into the vulnerable gaps where the male armor is. The male is those little rings, right? Like there in that picture. It's about doing as much of that as you can. These harassing wounds, maybe getting into the visor, right, getting under things, and then dropping the guy, and then pulling out your dagger, and then sitting on him, and then shanking him in the face, right, until he dies. Right, that's right, Bill?
No,
No? What do you know?
you don't want to kill a guy in armor, he's worth a lot of money.
Well, no, that's not if you did.
If you did that,
Initial duel to the death,
Yeah,
you do.
absolutely.
Okay, but you don't kill this guy by hitting him with a sword, right? But you can hit him with a poleaxe, right? Now this part of a poleaxe is actually not a meat tenderizer, even though it kind of looks like one. Like if you're really, you don't have your meat tenderizer, and the guys in your army camp really want tenderized meat, you know, you can use that. But it's so it doesn't slide off things. So when you hit someone with it, it does nice crunchy things. So know how your weapons work, right? You can't just make assumptions about this kind of stuff. You have to know, and there's not a lot of published material on this stuff, right? Like we did these tests against male and jacks. We were using factory Albion edges, right, back then, because we didn't know how to sharpen swords in 2008 or 9. That's something I discovered just because I just became frustrated with dull swords and swords getting dull after spending 8 hours with stones. And it's, you know, so we've got the grinders and we figured out. Now we know. Now we have edges that you can shave with. And they're not any weaker than the edges were because we didn't change the shape of the edge, we just polished it, right? We turned the edge from this to this, right? So we actually made it stronger. So again, there's not a lot of this stuff. So if you wanna practice this art seriously as a martial art, you have to experiment with your weapons. You have to figure out what they could do, what they could take. You have to break a few. Okay? I have bent Albion swords in finding, you know, looking for. I've not completely broken any because I just can't. Right? They're beautiful and they're expensive and I love them. I can't break them, but I could bend one here and there. They're straightable a certain number of times. But figure out how your weapons work. You ever wonder? Who's handled like period swords? Period antiques. All right, you ever wonder why some of them are these like superbly balanced things that you would love to fence with, and others are like these heavy hunks of these crowbar club things? You'd be like, what is this? Right? Was this made by someone who didn't know what they were doing? Nope. It was made by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and we're going to get to that later. Click. Okay. Cutting, right? Cutting is an important part of martial arts, something I've been spreading for, what, 8 years now? And it's kicked in, everyone's doing it, or most people are doing it. But it's not enough to just cut stuff, right? If you want to do this as a martial art, you have to know what cutting is for, right? Cutting is a test of technique, right? The stupid stuff you got, like people are like, well, there's no tatami cutting in the sources. Who cares? Tatami is just what we have today to test your technique. You can test your technique 100 ways. If you know what you're doing, you can just say, okay, dude, cut the air. No, you suck, right? You don't need tatami, right? Like to run a cutting tournament today, I don't need tatami. For me, like I could sit down and I could be like, score, 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 right? Score, right? But the thing is, you won't believe me. You'll be like, he's just giving prizes to people he likes, right? Which would probably be true. I'm very. But the point is that the tatami, once you get to a certain point, you don't need anything to please silence your phones. You don't need anything to cut. But if you're not at that point, which, I mean, I'm kidding, I'm not really at that point yet. Close, but not quite. You need to cut something to test technique. You have to understand the feedback mechanism. You have to understand whatever it is you're cutting tells you about your technique, right? You have to make corrections. You have to know how to make corrections based on the feedback, right? So know the place of cutting. That's very important to a martial art, right? Next, thrusting, right? Know the place of thrusting. Like here's an interesting martial question. If you stab someone, if they're standing completely still, right? If you stab them, it is just as easy to pull your sword out, almost, as it practically as it is to stick it in. But if someone is moving, right, and you stab them while they're moving, now the orientation has changed. There is stress on the blade, right? For example, come here for a second. Can I use this? Is this yours? Yeah. All right. So, jam this hard under your arm. So if I stab Jeff straight in, I could just pull it out, right? Okay? But if I stab Jeff and suddenly we're over here, right, and the thing is bent like that, and I'm pulling it this way, right, all of a sudden this now becomes harder to pull out. This is an exaggeration, right, but it could, there, thank you. But it could be just a little bit. So I stab him here, and all of a sudden now I'm over here, and there's stress in the blade that way, and maybe it's lodged against something, and it's hard to get out. In weapon-based martial arts, such as some of the Japanese arts, they have a saying where it's 40% in, 60% out. So whatever it took to get it in, right, it takes so if it's 40% to get in, it takes 1/3 more force to get it out. So a lot of the training is stab, withdraw, right? How many of you train to pull your swords out after thrusting? Well, you shut up. Well, you try too. Knife people do not answer my question. The other thing is the lethality of thrusting, right? And we're going to talk more about this in the phases of the fight. But the truth is that unless you actually stab someone in the brain, right, they're not going to stop. The heart will stop them in a few seconds, right? But anything else, they probably won't even know they've been stabbed. Okay? So, like for example, you have a lot of guys like, the IPR is the best weapon. It can kill any weapon. I stab you, right? You're like, oh, hack. Right? And now you're going to crawl away and die, especially in the Middle Ages, right? Because they didn't have like antibiotics and stuff. You're going to die, right? But not before you hack that guy's head in half, right? Because being stabbed doesn't kill you, right? Unless you're stabbed in the brain. And not even the brain guarantees death. Brain stem is the only guarantee of death. And the brain stem happens to be behind the, you can answer this, the face, which is why in KDF we are told to stab to the face, right? Okay. So about understanding the effects of thrusting, I have a little anecdote that I learned from my Barado teacher, which is a Japanese martial art that starts in the scabbard, about Toyama-ryu, which is a school of Japanese swordsmanship, and their kata number 3. Okay? Kata number 3 is you're walking down the street, minding your own business, right? La-di-da-da-da-da-da. Actually, I will just do this. All right? You're walking down the street, minding your own business, and a dude is charging you with a sword raised above his head who wants to destroy your face, right? So you don't like this. So you draw your sword, right? Stab him. Now, in the original version of the kata, you stabbed him in the solar plexus, right? Stabbing in the solar plexus gives you a couple of seconds or a fraction to pull the sword out, parry his cut, and you can let go of the scabbard because it's actually hanging off your belt, and finish him, right? And then you flick his blood off contemptuously, right? And sheath your sword and go, and walk away. That's actually part of the kata, okay? So, they taught this kata in World War II, and they sent people out, and then people got killed, right? And the reason people got killed is they realized that stabbing someone in their solar plexus doesn't give you that second to pull the sword out and parry their cut. So people were walking down the street, pulling out their sword, stabbing their solar plexus, ha! Dead. Wow, right? So you're like, shit, we have to test this. We're not going to talk about how they tested it. But they figured out now that if you stab in the heart, you get that second to pull out the sword and parry that cut. So they changed the kata. Now you stab to the heart. Okay? So that's a little anecdote about how effective thrusts are. Which is, right? So you have to understand the place of thrusts in your fighting. You can't assume that a thrust means that you have won. You can't assume that a cut means that you have won either. Right? We're going to talk about this later. Click. Understand how weapons interact, right? That's very important. Okay? So, fetters, right? People are like, I fight with steel. That's more realistic than your padded boffer swords, right? That's a common thing, right? Well, in some ways, padded boffer swords are more realistic than steel, right? At least steel fetters, because steel fetters slide around each other, right? They don't bind. You know why it's called a bind? It's not called a slip and slide, right? That's something else. It's called a bind. They stick, right? They don't stick a lot. Like, it's not hard to move it around, but you feel that stick. Fetters don't do this, right? Some of the padded swords, because they're rough textured cloth on the outside, they kind of stick a little, right? So don't get so haughty about your steel swords, because they're not a realistic training tool. Blunt, for example. I believe that you have a line of blunts coming out, right? The Purple Heart has new blunts. Albions had the Lichtenauer. Europeans have been using blunts for a long time, so in some ways, in that area, they're kind of ahead of us. But you have to understand how these things work. Now, see, in this plate, I'm not sure, but I believe that it's showing that he broke his spear with the sword, right? So that's just an example of how weapons interact. See, it's the only slide I could find in the manuscripts. Okay, click. All right. How many of you study anatomy? Right? Good, right? You have to know, if you don't understand the human body, you don't know how it works, you don't know how to break it, right? You don't know where your most effective thrusts are. You don't know, you might want to stab the heart, but you might not know where the heart is, right? You don't know what tendons to cut or whatever. That's not as cut and dry as you would think, which we will find out in a bit. Play. Now this is an extremely important part of this lecture. The phases of the fight. Okay. Now, different people categorize these things in different ways, right? It doesn't really matter how you categorize it. These are just semantics. But the phases of the fight are real. Like, for example, I have the mistake phase. Some people don't think of that as a phase. Some people think of that as just a transition from phase to phase. I just wanted to call it, because I like number 5, right? So I call it that phase. The build-up, right? And we're actually going to watch machete videos, machete fighting videos, just a few. Nothing too gruesome, right? And we're going to look at some of these phases and how they transition. So the build-up is when the fight is about to happen, right? Now, before we continue, look, this point right here, there's a huge social element in every real fight, right? So one of the artificialities or the artifact of tournament fighting is that it removes the social element from the equation, right? There is no social element. We are going here to fight. We salute, we like each other, now we fight, right? That's it. In a real fight, right, there's always some reason for the fight. It's not like we're walking down the street and I look at you and I'm like, dude, bro, let's just fight to the death. Bro, we were born for this, right? That's not how it happens, right? It was more like, what did you say about my sister? Right? Things like that. Like, there's always a reason. So the build-up is where the piece, right, transitions into the fight, right? So that could be like, you know, like us walking, you know, like you sitting down, I'm like, bro, what are you doing on my block? Bro, this is my block. Yo, what are you doing here, right? You see how I'm going forward and backing away? Right? Because I'm not sure. I'm kind of scared, right? Because I exist in a state of peace, like we all do. And so did they in the Middle Ages. Middle Ages wasn't some, you know, even, I was going to say like the Wild West, but the Wild West wasn't that either, right? Everyone lived in a state of peace, right? You walk around, hi Bob, hi Sally, or hi Matilda, whatever the hell Gertrude, you know, back then. We lived in a state of peace. So to transition from that state of peace to a fight is difficult, right? It's emotionally draining, right? There are several people who can effortlessly transition from the state of peace to the state of fight. Sociopaths, some, not even all, right? Psychopaths, professional killers, right? Such as, for example, extremely experienced combat veterans, right? What makes a combat veteran more dangerous than a normal person, right? It's not that they can shoot better. I mean, sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, right? It's not that they're better in using their weapons. There could be guys that are better at, you know, pulling their weapon out. They're better at, you know, putting on camo and hiding in bushes. The thing that makes those people extremely dangerous is that they can transition from peace to fight very easily, right? We cannot. Well, most of us can. And even in that skill, a professional fades with time, right? So you start out being able to do, very few people can keep that up for a long time. Because again, there are severe social constraints on everything we do. So in the build-up phase, I'm like, I'm not sure, right? And sometimes the build-up phase is very quick. You know, like maybe what? You know what? I am sure, right? It could happen very quickly. There could be no build-up phase, right? It could just be like, there he is, ah, right? Because like it says in that bullet, a fight can start at any phase. It can skip phases. You can sometimes go back phases. So the build-up is that transition, the dance. Now, we're all very familiar with the dance because we are all HEMA fighters, right? KDF fighters, Fiore fighters, Meyer fighters, right? The thing we do in the ring, that's the dance. Okay, and we're going to see how that works in real fights with machetes. That thing where you're like, you know, that's the dance. And what the dance is a aspect of the fight where you do not want to get hit, right? All of your social restraints, or most of your social restraints, are in place. You have not yet been overcome with severe blood loss, okay? Because we human beings find it very difficult to kill each other, right? In the past, before the PlayStation generation, before video games desensitized us from killing people with guns, it was very hard to get a soldier to actually shoot at another soldier. In the Civil War, they had a huge problem with this. In World War II, they had a problem with this, but by then they had figured out how to condition people. The Japanese decided that we would be better than everybody, and we would condition our soldiers far better than anybody else, and they were a little too good at it. Right? But the point is that you can't just take someone from a farm who has never killed anyone, give him a rifle, and send him to war and have him shoot it. You can now, right? Because to us now, it's like, oh, this is Call of Duty, right? Bing, 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 right? But you couldn't back then. So this dance is where the buildup has happened, right? We've decided that we want to fight, but we don't really want to commit to this cold-blooded murder. We don't want to start hacking each other up into 1,000 pieces yet, right? So we're careful, right? We make strikes that are at the perfect distance, right? We cover ourselves as we strike. There are so many more components to our strikes than just hack, 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 right? The wounds that you suffer in the dance phase, and I'm going to tell you exactly where I find this information are seldom incapacitating. You know, we talk about like swords can lop off your arm, swords can cut off your head, right? A sword can cut off your head. That doesn't really happen in the dance phase. Now, we don't know this for sure in the Middle Ages, but we know this in the 17th century, the 18th century, the 19th century, and today. And again, we're going to talk about how we know this. The mistake phase is when when someone in the dance phase does something stupid, right? Like for example, we're going to see some examples of machete fights, but I might overextend, right? One of my thrusts or cuts, and I might trip and go down on one knee, right? Shit, now I can't move, right? Or something similar. Any mistake that you make can be exploited. Now that transitions into either the struggle phase or the kill phase. The struggle phase is like, for example, grappling, right? Where we're having this dance, right? We get a little too close to each other, we've both transitioned through the mistake phase, and then we grab each other, and now we're grappling, we're struggling, right? Or you could skip that. Let's say I'm fighting you, and I trip and fall, and you're standing there, and you really want to kill me, and that's when your reluctance to kill changes into the bloodlust mode. Right? Now, we humans are very interesting because we do have this reluctance to kill each other, but we also have this savage bloodlust that can be triggered. Have you ever seen like a knife attack where a person's like, right? It's captured on like ATM cameras or whatever, and they're just stabbing, or a bat attack where it's not just one dude hits another dude and says, oh, what have I done, and then runs away. He hits him, the guy falls, and he just goes, bam, and he just basically beats him to death, right? Until there's nothing left but a pile of bloody meat, right? That's the bloodlust that we get. But that has to be triggered, right? Only like real extreme professionals can just can kill that way without the bloodlust controlling them, without any sort of transition phase. So the kill phase is where you basically just hack someone up. So if we're fighting, we're dancing, something happens, I get your sword out of the way, and all of a sudden, here you are in front of me, your sword's over there, and I just start hacking you, right? HEMA fencing that we do, all the fencing that we do here is almost exclusively limited to the dance phase. All right, this is what I meant before by one or two phases of the fight. It is a small subset of the fight. Click. Okay, so this is very important. The fighting that we do out there is 90% dance, 10% struggle. Okay, there are mistakes in there too, but again, the mistake is not a real phase. I only put that in there because I like the number 5. Right? People make mistakes, but the mistakes don't, and another reason I didn't put that in there is the mistakes don't lead to the kill phase because there is no kill phase. A mistake could lead to the struggle phase. All right? But the grappling that we have sometimes work with the binds where you're really close and you're like, what do I do, right? That's the struggle phase. So we do that, right? We don't have a kill phase. We don't have a build-up phase. You know how everyone says, everyone talks about cutting with a step, like in KDF, right? You pass with the right, attack from, or start with the left, pass the right. That's all dance phase stuff, right? When you're standing over someone and you're killing them, there's no footwork. I mean, except you like stepping over guts and like getting out of blood puddles. I mean, there is sometimes, but what? Oh, nothing. But a lot of these things that we do, that we train, it is specifically for a certain phase of the fight, right? In the afterblow, for example, only exists in the dance phase and possibly the struggle phase, right? There's no afterblow when you're in the kill phase. Kill phase, the guy's lying on the ground and you're killing him. The restrained bloodlust boundary that I talked about, we don't want to kill each other until we do. And when we do, we don't stop, right? And has anyone not seen or experienced this blood? I mean, I don't mean in yourself. I mean, in the news or on the internet somewhere, in the dark web. Has anyone not seen this? Does anyone not know what I'm talking about? How we don't want to kill until we do. Okay, so we understand this. Tournaments, right, one of the biggest problems with the way we fence today is that we stop the action way too soon. And you're going to see this when you watch machete fights. The dance phase does not stop when someone hits someone's leg, or when someone hits someone's arm, or even when someone hits someone's head. It does not. You're going to see people get hit in all kinds of ways, and they're still going. The wounds that we suffer, if it's a very severe wound, right, very severe, then yes, it'll incapacitate us. But those wounds are just very hard to inflict in the dance phase of the fight. And yeah, you're going to see that in machete fights. Now, the more skilled someone is with the actual use of their weapon, right? Not in how well they fence, but with the actual use of that weapon. It's striking another human being and doing as much damage as possible. Okay, the more likely that person is either to merge the dance phase with the kill phase. So, we're doing this dance and I go, ah, and all of a sudden the guy's like, dead. And I'm like, whoa, that was so cool. I didn't have to cross that boundary. I'm still civilized, right?
Mike,
And remember the heavy, yes?
would that be analogous to like a one-punch knockout in MMA or something?
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens, right? That guy, he may not be the greatest fighter, but he's a great puncher. So when he hits you, yeah, that's actually an excellent, I'm going to put that in future slides. Please remind me, like on Facebook. That's an excellent example. Did everybody hear that? Okay, so yeah, one knockout punch. Remember we talked about the swords with the heavy blades? That's what they're for. Okay, yeah, you sacrifice some agility, right? I mean, some of them are for cavalry use, so there's that. But a lot of them, like this one right here, this is a much comparatively heavier blade than an arming sword, right? So this delivers a much more effective strike to the person. So your wounds become more effective. So it's not always just the person. It's sometimes the weapon. Okay, play. All right. So are there any questions before we continue to machete fights?
I have a question.
Hold on, let me just go ahead.
So, in some of those manuscript photos you showed, one person had a scabbard, the other person didn't. What is the relative availability of a scabbard of the historic era?
Oh, if you had a sword, you're a scabbard.
Okay.
I mean, unless like I don't know that much about the Montante, but I mean, maybe they would have had scabbards, maybe they would have carried the shoulder. I don't know. But if you had a smaller sword, like a messer or a long sword, you were in a scabbard. The long sword, this is a very typical long sword suspension. It's a 3-point suspension. I can only put it on for you. So this is how something like this would be worn. This back thing keeps it from going forward too much. Slide it in the right place. It's also meant to be worn a little higher up. You could adjust this so that it goes to different places, the way it rides. All right. The way you draw this is you put it up here, right? Don't hurt anybody. Grab it here, right, and then pull it out this way because it's too long for you to. This is why this has to be mobile. Like you can't tuck this through your belt. Like some of the smaller swords in the earlier period, they had the bigger, fatter belts and they would wear them pressed to their hip like this because you could draw that sword without this whole, complicated thing. But long swords are long, right? That's why they're called long swords. Well, maybe not. All right, your question.
So one of the things you're talking about, the practicing with our sharp swords and things like that. One of the things I've seen, and I don't know if you address this in your training stuff, is that people tend to treat their sharp swords like they're lightsabers. Overly sharp. So we can walk into a kitchen, any of us will pick up a butcher knife, a kitchen knife. I mean, we don't play with it, but we're comfortable doing that. Why do you think we have a psychological aversion to touching a long sword? I mean, you see, not that we should change our safety regimen for the cutting purpose or anything. You see people very deliberately holding them in front of themselves, as opposed to just carrying a sharp object.
There's a social reason and a practical reason, right? The social reason is that we're not used to them. Like, we're used to knives, but we're not used to swords. The practical reason is that it's big. Like, this is very sharp, right? But I don't care about this, right? I'll swing this around. I'm not gonna do that. Now, if I was doing that with a sword, which is the perfect time to go through, and I went like that would have been a very bad day. I would have shown you exactly, it would have given you a great answer to your question, but it would not have ended well for me or for him.
I would have matrixed it.
Yeah. Right, oh, he's a knife guy. He'd been like, yeah. All right, any more questions? All right, let's watch some machete fights. Now, I didn't put ones where gruesome, terrible things happen, right? But you are going to get to, who has their smartphones with them? Okay, after this, I'm going to have you look at machete wounds on your individual phones, because we're not going to put that up there. The light, the light. Okay. So now this is the build-up phase, right? These two guys that one has a machete. They're obviously in some sort of argument, right? Now this one pulls his machete. Now, that build-up phase is over, right? He's going in, right? They are now in what phase? Dance phase, right? Now, which phase is that? Which phase is that? Mistake phase, right? Now, the mistake phase could have very easily led to the kill phase in this case. That guy's on the ground, and this other guy would just start hacking into bits, right? But he's not going to do that. He has decided, or not decided, just decided for him, that they are now in the struggle phase, right? And in this particular fight, these guys are struggling long enough. We're going to have to watch this whole thing, but for the bystanders to get the courage to get involved, right? Now, so this guy has a machete. What? Chair? No. So this guy, no, I don't have the one with the chair. I didn't want to spend too much time on this, but this guy obviously has beef with this other guy, right? We don't know what that is. Right? Okay, now, all right, hold on. Did you happen to notice before I paused it where that guy was sitting? There was either a post or a wall right by his head, right? Now that guy on the left, he's not taking this guy very seriously at all. Now look what happened. Okay, did you see that? The guy, he got enough courage, right? He's walking around. The guy who sat down is kind of an idiot, right? He didn't read the signs. He didn't understand that guy was about to try to murder him, right? This guy just goes right to kill. However, because of that wall, the machete hit that wall and broke, right? Okay. Now this next one, so this is very interesting because it shows how the build-up can lead to the kill phase, so it's skipping everything else, right? That guy, there was no dance phase there because that guy was sitting down like a dummy. If it wasn't for that hole or wall, whatever it is, he'd be dead, right? This is not interesting. Now the next one shows how a kill phase is entered right away, and also shows you how durable the human body is. Now, you don't actually see any bad stuff, but this might be disturbing. So if there's anyone who's disturbed by graphic stuff, you can leave the room for a bit and pull you back in. Is there anybody? Okay, I've been warned. So these guys are hanging out in the corner. This might be the Philippines, I'm not sure. Okay, and then these other guys pull up, right? And one of those guys has a machete. Or maybe they all have machetes, I'm not sure. See, those guys are pulling up. And that's when these guys realize that bad shit is about to go down. Right? Now one of them falls, right? And look what these guys are doing. He has a machete too, but he doesn't get to use it, right? You know, you might be thinking, wow, machetes really suck, right? Wait till you look at the machete wound, right? Now, how many cuts is this guy taking? And he's still doing what?
Fighting back.
Oh,
Well, he's still breathing.
Yeah.
For now.
Alright, tell me when to stop this. This goes on for a while. Alright, so you guys are probably good. Alright.
They're going back for more.
Yeah, no, they come back for more, and this goes on quite a while. And the guy obviously dies. Alright? That's my smart ass slide. Okay. Alright, my clicker guy. Alright, now, after watching those videos, do you think that any way of training that halts the action after one hit has martial value?
Sure.
I don't mean like any martial value at all. I mean like this is the way you train and that's it.
It's limited.
It's extremely limited. I mean, is there martial value? Yeah, there is some, right? Obviously. It teaches you how to excel in certain aspects of the fight. Click. Okay. Machetes suck and swords are better. So there's two things we're going to do. First, we're going to look at a machete. Okay? So first, let's look at a messer. Is everyone familiar with a messer? I don't need to pass this around, right? Because everyone's, if you want to handle these, Alameda has a bunch, you should probably buy one. These are pretty cool. Okay, this is a machete. Pass this around. This is not a very sharp. Is this sharp, Pat? Okay, so don't like touch the edge. But it's not like shaving sharp, right? It is? Oh. All right. Come here for a sec. So hold this. What? You're crazy.
This is what I practice on.
All right. No. not that different, right? These are serious weapons, right? Now, if you want to do this, take out your phones right now and go to Google or image search and look up machete wounds and spend maybe a minute looking at that.
Many of the commercial machetes out there are much flimsier than
They are,
that
yeah,
used to be.
They are. But many of them are not. Right? And again, a lot of the commercial machetes, like, and it's true in like Trinidad and Dominican Republic and all that kind of stuff, the same thing. But a lot of them are like this, right? There's a wide variety. Like you saw some dude had like a longer curved one. I mean, this is considered a machete, right? And this is a nice thick blade, or it gets used like a machete. Machetes are for, you know, brush clear, agricultural stuff, things like that. That's why you can't, in places like that, outlaw machetes completely, because people need them to live, right? So has everyone looked at, or everyone who wants to look at some machete wounds? These are some serious wounds, right? This is not something that you can screw around with. This will hack you to bits, right? And but we just saw, right? Now, in the fight where the guys were on a motorcycle, right? You saw how, I don't know if you guys saw this, and we can watch it again if you want. When he made the mistake, the guy, before he fell, he clocked it right in the leg. The guy standing, solid hit, bam, right in the leg. The guy who ended up winning with the struggle, right? Did that guy instantly fall down?
Nope.
No. As a matter of fact, there was one that I didn't get to download where, because it wasn't really a fight and I didn't think it was important, but now I'm thinking I should have. There was a guy who attacked a cab driver, right? And the cab driver, he was like getting him in the car. So the cab driver escaped from the other side of the car and he ran off and fell down, right? People fall down under stress. That's a thing, right? We practice like balance, dancing, and footwork. One of the reasons we do that is so we don't fall down, right? Again, if we have good footwork in our muscle memory, when we get stressed and clumsy, we'll be able to maintain that kind of footwork. Whereas that cab driver didn't. He wasn't hurt. He got up and he just stumbled and fell because he was stressed. That happens. Those of you who've been in life or death situations, whether it's combat or street fights or some things like that, you know about this kind of stuff. You get kind of like this, you're clumsy as shit, right? And you can fall. The other guy went right for the kill phase, right? He picked up his machete, now he's on the ground, he was just whack, whack. And he did this a bunch of times. He hit him a lot of times. And that guy got up and went to the hospital, okay? And he was jacked up, right? When he got to the hospital, they were like, what? Right? Because he had stuff hanging, right? But he was able to get to the hospital. A lot of these fights, these people get hacked to bits, but they don't realize it until later. That guy who took about 50, 60 things, he was still kicking out with his leg. There was one where you saw where he tried to do something with his arm, and his arm kind of flopped. Did you notice that? But he's like, oh, and that's the first time he became aware of that, because you saw he kind of looked at it, right, and then it flopped, right? So the human body is extremely resilient. Click. All right, so we did that already. Click. Now, our medieval ancestors had a way of training, fighting, fencing training, that actually factored in a lot of this stuff, and they called it the Ganga system or the counted blow system. Okay, where you do not halt, and this is Matt Gallus's research largely, and where I get most of my information on this stuff. Matt Gallus did years of fantastic research. And he brought this to the community a long, long time ago. And well, a bunch of us were like, yeah, this is so cool, so cool. Let's do like one odd Franco-Belgian tournament over here where we do that kind of stuff. And now let's get back to the, get back to the one-shot, stop, halt, the action stuff that we're used to. Like, we are brought up in a sporting culture, right? We take everything that we do and we turn it into a sport, right? We have flags, we have judges, we have this. That's the culture that we grew up in. And if we heedlessly apply that culture to a martial art, we're going to turn it into a sport. Now again, is that bad? No. The stuff that we do, the tournament stuff, it's tremendous fun, right? It's awesome. And it has martial value, if used in context, right? Okay, but again, if you don't do the other stuff too, or mostly, then you are turning it into a sport. Click. Now we talked about how some of the stuff that we see in machete fights matches the period accounts, or the accounts we have of period sword fights. There's this dude named D.A. Kinsley who self-published a bunch of books. He sells them through Lulu. You need to buy his books. What he did is he compiled a bunch of first-hand or sometimes second-hand accounts, like I saw my buddy Bill, that's, you know, of sword fights, from as far back as we have those accounts for. I've read one of his books, it's about this thick, and it is full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of descriptions of fights, and if you then watch the machete fights, you're like, huh, right? It's all the same. I mean, yeah, there's dudes picking up plastic lawn chairs in the Dominican Republic, like warding off machetes. You're not going to do that on a Napoleonic battlefield. But you might have a code. Like you saw this in rapier, right? Some dudes wrapping their cloaks around their arm and all that kind of stuff. The stuff matches. The phases of the fight exist. The fact that someone can be hacked 20 times and still kill you exists, right? All this stuff is the same. Like, read his books. Now, there's this dude. Now, Matt Gallus will get mad at me because I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly. It's Silvio Piccolomini.
Piccolomini.
What?
Piccolomini.
Piccolomini. Oh, thank you. Now, Matt, are you happy? Okay. So, this guy, this French guy, Michel de whatever, right? He visited Italy in, was it 1580 to 81, right? And he went to the Duke of Florence, and he kept this Piccolomini guy, right, as like his arms expert, right? And with this guy Silvio, he didn't like the fighting that was going on with the Balinese primarily, with their afterblow and their halting the action, like the whole, you know, our concept of one tempo afterblow and all that. That comes from back then. He didn't like that because he maintains that this is completely different from what people really do when they fight, as experience has shown. Okay? So even people back then, when the Middle Ages transitioned, you know, when different weapons came onto the scene, when they were playing around with different stuff, people back then complained about the competitive fighting that was going on at the time. All right? So, and as we all know, for example, 3227A, right, spends tons of time complaining about bad masters, right? So there's a lot of bitching going on. George Silver's entire existence is based on complaining about rapier heads, right? But yeah, so what he's talking about here, and Matt's other research and the research of the people he works with points to the fact that they're talking about the count-and-blow system. So there's two ways that they would have done combat back then. Knights in armor would have basically, you know those Battle of the Nations guys that we all say, ha ha ha, those guys are animals, they don't do that. They're actually more realistic fighters than what we're doing. Because that's the type of, not realistic fighters, but their practice is closer to what people did back in the olden days. That doesn't mean that we should do that, because it's not exactly historical. But two knights would have fought in armor until one of them fell, right? And there are various ways of doing this. The Ganga system is a system of counted blows where, do you guys mind if we stay a little late for this? Just a few minutes. It's not a big, is that okay? Does anyone have anywhere they need to be? Okay, all right. So the way it works is you have two guys. Let's say you're fighting a Ganga of 5 blows, right? So you have me and you are fighting, and I get to strike 5 strikes at you, hit or miss, right? Whether I completely swing and miss, whether you parry, or whether I hit you, the action doesn't stop. Once I have reached my 5, let's say I have hit you or swung at you 5 times, you swung at me 3 times. My name is called, or however it is announced, that I have reached my counted blows. From then, all I can do is defend, right? And you still got 2 left, so now you have 2 strikes against me. Now, even if I hit, the action isn't halted, right? We keep fighting. There's no pauses. There's no, halt, go back to your corners. There's none of that. We keep bang, bang, hack, hack. Now they had, go ahead.
What constitutes an actual strike? Is it anything that comes from?
Well, I mean, we're not sure, but according to Matt and his research, it's my attempt to hit you, right, as opposed to like feint, and then like, so if I feint and come around, that's 1 strike. Yes.
So with the Midwest Historical Fencing League for the last 2 years, we've been doing a gang system, right? So what we would call as a strike is just an attempted blow, like something that looked like it was an attempted strike to your opponent, right? Whether it was paired or not, and so the others.
And then there are people today who fence to the bloom. Do you guys know what that is? It's fighting to the highest bleeding head wound using a Ganga system. Don't ask me how I know this. There are pictures of certain people have posted stuff. I mean, the information's out there. But this is the way they fought. And they had restraints, for example, you were not allowed to grapple, right? Because grappling was done separate. They wanted to concentrate on training the fight, right? So if you were able to grapple, then that's what these things evolved to every time. And you're thinking, well, grappling is what makes us martial. No. Yes, it is, right? But you have to be able to separate that from in training, right? So sometimes you could grapple and sometimes you don't, because you, again, in a counted blow system, it would always go to grappling almost right away. Because if we close and don't stop, especially if we're not that good at distance, right, we're going to be face to face and we're going to grab each other because we all love each other and we're going to start hugging, right, violently hugging until one of us falls. So, and they had restraints. Not always, for example, in some, there's variations, but usually you couldn't come cross to cross, which means that it kept you apart, right? And a lot of these things are regulated by gentlemanly conduct, right? I don't want to be sexist, but that's what was called back in the day. there was an honor code. You were expected to behave, and if you did not behave, you were chastised. And if you were a person who's known to not behave honorably in these situations, and you were not someone that would be invited to participate, you'd be kicked out of your Marksburger Guild, whatever it is that you were doing. Are there any questions about this kind of stuff?
Where do you think, from a training perspective, like continuous action fits in with the fact that sometimes you do hit people and they just fall down? Just like you shoot people and sometimes they fall down.
So you do hit people sometimes and they sometimes fall down. Like we said before, the better you are using your weapon, the more effective your weapon. We mentioned heavy blades before, right? It would be harder for you to maneuver a heavier blade, but if you actually hit someone with it, it would do more damage and you are more likely to end the fight. However, in a training situation, as we've seen, and as you can read in D.A. Kinsley books, that's not a common thing. It happens, right? There's accounts, for example, where I hacked off some dude's head, and then I ran up to this other dude in a yellow coat. Another dude got between us, so I hacked off his fucking head, right? And then this dude and I fought, and I hit him 10 times, right? And I couldn't get through his coat, and then I hit him, and he was bleeding, but he was still going, and then we fought. Finally, he tripped on a rock, he fell, and I shanked him right in his face, right? So there's things like that. But from a training perspective, it's like, so what? If you're trained to keep fighting and the guy dies, you win. If you're trained to stop fighting at the end of the action and the guy doesn't die and you stop and then you're dead. Who's heard the expression, train as you would do or you will do as you have trained? Right? That's a common thing. Obviously, we're not going to get into a sword fight. But if we want to do this as a martial art, we have to train as though we would. We do not want to train to stop fighting when we hit the other person. We want to train to keep fighting. Because again, we'll know when the guy's dead because he will no longer be moving, right? Okay, so that's when we can stop fighting. Until then, there is no reason for us to stop fighting in a real situation. Clay. So I'm going to kind of gloss through this because a lot of you know this, right? So there's a lot of artifacts to, but this is why I wanted to stay a little late because I'm not going to completely gloss over it because it is important. There's a lot of artifacts to fighting in gear, right? It's more than just limits mobility, okay? Gear distorts distance, right? Especially the way we fight. It doesn't have to, right? But the way we fight, you score a hit, and you score a hit with a good part of the sword, right? This part of the sword. I'm not afraid of this part of the sword. If I did that here, I'd lose fingers, because they can shave with this. Not afraid of this part of the sword. This part of the sword doesn't cut very well, right? If you score with this, what's going to happen? You get your point, right? So it distorts distance in that respect. It distorts distance in the sense that we're not scared of being hit. All right, so sometimes in a dance phase, we actually get closer than you would in a real dance phase. So it's the opposite of what I was just talking about. Because you're not afraid. I mean, yeah, it hurts when you get hit, but when you're all adrenaline up, you barely feel it, and it's just pain, right? People get injured, but it's rare. So this is what the gear, because it removes the fear of being hit, it meshes the kill phase with the dance phase. There's no kill phase or dance phase out there. It's all one and the same. We act as though it's one and the same, but it's not, right? It has never been and is not, in the real world, part of the same thing. Can it happen, like you were saying? Absolutely, right? But that is not a typical, like, out of 10 hits that you strike someone, if you do the statistics based on Kinsley's accounts, right, or watching machete fights, out of, 20 strikes you hit someone with, one of them might drop them, right? And those are not good odds, right? And again, that's different for people with certain weapons, like an axe, right? You hit a dude with an axe, yeah, I mean, even so, like, I was hit in the foot with an axe, right? And I walked around, I was like, shit. 20 minutes later, I couldn't walk for 6 months, right? But for those minutes, I was like, shit. Okay, gear can change the outcome of exchanges, right? Let's say that you go into high-long tog, or a little too close to me, and I just go, give you a nice kill face shot right on your arm. Where have I hit you? In the head, yeah. Because in that situation, I told you I'd give you a kill face shot right in your arm, right? With my nice, big, heavy sword, I'm going through that arm and into the head. Even if I don't, I'm incapacitating that arm. But from then on, in gear, we are now forced to deal with an afterblow from a person with 2 arms. Is that a bad thing? No. Because we want to be able to deal, because our strike could miss. But again, you have to be aware of these artifacts and how they manifest. Fighting in gear tends to be safe, right? So you act accordingly, and you're made to act accordingly by tournament stack, right? You're not allowed to stand over some dude wailing on him until he dies, right? Because that would be unsafe. So that's a huge artifact if you're training martial fighting, right? It removes all social aspects of fighting. Like we talked about, the social aspects of fighting are massively important, okay? If you don't train for the social aspect of fighting, you are not training a martial art. And geared fighting, this kind of fighting, removes that. It makes people fight too fast, right? It doesn't make people move too fast, it's a distinction. It makes them fight too fast, right? You could move super fast, right, to land that strike. But if you make decisions too fast because you're afraid the other guy will get a point, right, then you're being dumb, right? You're not making the smart decisions. Like people say a lot of the blind stuff with the fooling, it's like it happens in tournaments supposedly, but it's very rare, and usually people don't risk it because most people are like, hack, 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 so you're like, oh, I want to feel shit, he's, you know? It makes you make decisions that you wouldn't make if you were facing someone with a sharp sword. Because a mistake there is really bad, it hurts a lot, right? The most important thing about gear is that artifacts caused by gear multiply, they stack, right? One thing leads to another, to another, to another. Distorted motion, distorted distance, all combine to create more problems, right? It's a geometric progression. Click. Now, there's people who believe that fighting minimal, no gear, right? So that has other artifacts. It teaches you not to hit your opponent, right? Not really. You can't really hit him because you're not wearing gear. If you do that, you'll break bones and stuff, right? It permanently locks you in a dance phase. I mean, unless you allow grappling too, right? Because then that's the struggle. It distorts distance more than fighting in gear does, right? Because you don't want to hit the person. So a lot of times what people do is they'll strike out of distance, right? Oh, I could have gotten you. Really? Could you? I don't know. Maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. If this is your only type of fencing, click. Okay? That's a problem. Click. So just a couple of, we did a lot of this, right? So we demonstrated how, for example, gear might limit this movement into this movement, forcing you to compensate, right? That's a training artifact. So a lot of people believe in training in gear, right? So they could better practice what they're going to do out there. If you train in gear, you are purposely training yourself wrong, not as a joke, but but for competition, which is again fine, but it's not martial. Right? If you train excessively in gear that you don't wear when actually fighting, you are not doing a martial art. Percussive pop strikes, right? A lot of people do things like this, pop, right? Because they want to get that strike in fast, right? I mean, yeah, we talked about how the human body takes a lot of punishment, right? How you can't rely on these one-shot kills, right? But why do you purposely want to not make one? Right, like a percussive pop strike with the tip of the sword isn't really going to do very much, right? You have in the dance phase, every time you strike, you risk you're entering the mistake phase, right? Okay, so why would you launch a purposely ineffective strike and risk entering the mistake phase, which could get your ass killed, right? But you do this in competition because it gets you points. Thrusts push you back, right? Thrusts push your head back, right? Like you charge in, you get thrust in the head, you stop. You get thrust in the body, you can't go forward, right? Because you're not actually being thrust, you're being stopped by a metal bar, right? Whereas in reality, if I'm charging you and you stab me, I'll be like, oh, hack, whoa, well that just happened, right? But yeah, fuck that guy, he's dead, but that just happened. So these things are all artifacts. We talked about the Montauk thing, not caring about the effects of your strike, that goes back to the pop strikes. In competitive fencing, I mean, some of us say we care, some of us really do care, and some of us try hard to make our strikes effective. But a lot of people don't, because you don't need to. It's not necessary, right? And eventually you're going to get tired of doing that and getting your ass handed to you by people who just go flick, 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 right? Okay, click. Now, none of this is to say that fencing like this is bad, right? Everything is good in moderation, okay? The tournaments have a lot of martial value in their place, in moderation, right? Training with minimal gear, right, is great if you do it in moderation. If that's not what you build your muscle memory on, right? You don't want to build your muscle memory on ways of moving that you don't do in a fight if you're training a martial art, right? Most of your skill, if you're doing a martial art, should come from, paired forms, paired drills, where you're practicing techniques with the power and intent, with the correct distance, right? With as little gear as you possibly need because you want to learn to move correctly, right? Does anyone have any questions about that? It seems pretty obvious, right? All of these things, the gear fencing, tournament fencing, cutting, these are all things that can improve your skill if you understand their place, if you use each the way it's meant to be used. if you want to do martial art, don't neglect the other things, right? There's no dagger tournaments, right? So why train dagger? Because if you want to do a martial art, you have to train dagger. You can't really fight with a poleaxe, not really. I mean, you kind of can, but it's not really realistic, because poleaxes, even the rubber ones, are dangerous as hell, right? The Purple Heart poleaxes will give you a massive concussion or worse if you get hit in the fencing mask with a real blow. Now, what people do when they fight with them is they kind of like temper their strikes. You know, like, that's training yourself wrong as a joke, right? Okay, click. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about before we wrap up is incentives, right? All our behavior, our social behavior, is based on incentives. Who has read Freakonomics? Great book. I strongly recommend it. You'll understand people a lot more. And it's actually, like, I don't like reading nonfiction, but I love Freakonomics. Just pick it up, start reading it, it's awesome. Huh?
You're gonna have a podcast as well.
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't like to read, listen to it on audio. So the method that we train, the way we train, is also based on incentives. And the hint for that, you know, in Japan there's kendo and kenjutsu, right? There are thousands of kendo guys for every kenjutsu guy, right? Why? Click. These are the incentives of competition. It's fun. It doesn't have to be too involved, right? For the highest level competitors, it's super involved. You know, tons of hours of training, right? All thousands of dollars a year. Travel all around the world. Super involved, right? But it doesn't have to. Anyone can pick up one of these things, slap on some gear, and go into, you know, the rookie training tournament or whatever, tier B, and just have a good time, right? Because it's fun. That's why we do it, supposedly, right? It's fun. It's far less expensive. You don't need all of this crap, right? You just need one of these and some gear, right? And you can go fight. You can go have fun. It's accessible to everybody almost, right? It's, you know, if you're good at it, you know, you get popularity. Popularity is a good incentive, right? Like, everybody knows who the top fighters are. It's like, oh, you know, there's this guy and Bob Jenkins and all these people, and, you know, wow, look, Bob Jenkins is so awesome. He's so cool. I love the Bob Jenkins, right? And you want to be Bob Jenkins, right? So that's an incentive. Prestige places that you have social support, right? We're all hugging each other and talking about how great times we had. There's all this social support structure. That's important. We are social animals. We need that, right? You get influence and power, right? If you're evil, you can steer things in directions you want, right? You can tell people what to do and have them do it. It's awesome. And then you get all these positive reinforcements. You get people give you prizes and shiny tchotchkes like medals, right? And you get rankings. You look, I'm number 112 out of 3,000, that's so awesome, right? Click. So what are the incentives of martial training? Click. What are they?
Badass. You don't die when you really do.
You don't, though. Not in this, right? You want to talk about martial training that you need, right? You don't need this, right? Click. Not so fast. Right, click. Let me tell you about a castle, right? There's a castle in France whose name I cannot pronounce, right? This is a picture of this castle. Do we have any French people here? Excellent. Okay, the next slide, you can tell me how to pronounce the name of this castle. So this is a castle in France. This is a picture of this castle today. Scientists, archaeologists, are building this castle using period technique. Click. Right, so there's a dude wearing modern t-shirt and pants using whatever this weird medieval contraption is. Right? They do everything, from quarry the stone to transport the stone. Right? Everything they do uses period techniques that they have researched. Right? Click. Okay, click again. How do you pronounce that? Yes, what he said. Right, I'm not even going to try that, sorry. So this castle, right, is very important, right? You can read that while I babble. This is a scientific project that people are funding. People are throwing, as you can imagine, it costs a lot of money to build this castle, right? And these guys are doing very important work. Let me know when everyone's done reading. Because I see people looking at it. We good? Okay, click. Okay. So why build this thing? Why do this, right? Obviously, it's an insight into the past. The entire field of archaeology exists, or anthropology exists, to look at the past, because we learn about ourselves by studying all the stupid shit we used to do in the olden days, right? Because we do the same stupid shit all the time. Like, we think things are so different now. They're not different, right? And some of us who are old enough are seeing history repeating itself in very disturbing ways that we were promised would never happen in the 80s, right? When we were going to school. We were told, this will never happen again. We are progressive now. Nope, it's all happening again, right? discovering ancient knowledge, because we're also arrogant, right? We think that, oh, everything we know is better and awesome. Don't eat fat, eat a lot of carbs. Millions die. Right? So, yeah, discovering ancient knowledge, such as the fact that you should eat fat, right, and meat and vegetables and stuff, and not carbs, right? Contributing to collective human knowledge, especially in the information age, where everything that we do might, unless we nuke ourselves, might last forever, right? Contributing to this pool of knowledge is priceless, right? What? Okay? So the incentives of focusing on the M in HEMA, right, are the same things. We would actually be recreating the real art of our ancestors. Not a sportified version of this art, but the real thing. We would be building the castle, right, using period tools and techniques. We can do it, we don't have to wear like fancy costumes doing it, we can do it like that dude in the t-shirt and khakis, right? But he was doing the important things, or we could do the same thing, right? We are contributing something bigger than ourselves. We are adding to the collective knowledge of our civilization, right? That has a lot of value. And can you do that without all this other stuff? No, because the analogy that I created here would be like building that castle using concrete and rebar, right? From a distance, it would look exactly the same. People say, look, I built a castle. It looks just like this castle in the manuscript. Look, right? The sources say that the tower goes over there, right? And the battlements go over there. And look, it looks just like this picture. But it's not, is it? And it's the same thing, right? If you don't practice all the stuff we discussed here, you are not practicing the art of our ancestors. You are not doing HEMA as a martial art. You are doing a sportified modern version, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I love it, right? I mean, before I got injured, I used to fight in a lot of competitions, right? I love competitions. I still do sometimes. It's very difficult for me to train, but I still do it. It's fun, it's great, and you should not stop, right? It's a great thing to do. But realize what it is. Realize what the difference is. Play it. So, martial summary, right? The real weapons, the real versions of the weapons, right? There's a difference between pros and kids. The real versions of the weapons. Do you drill with those real versions of the weapons, right? Do you practice using those weapons against things that give you feedback about your technique? Do you understand that feedback? Right? Do you train realistic technique, like pulling your sword out after a thrust, or the alternative, thrusting all the way to the hilt, whatever, under various circumstances? Do you have a scabbard for your sword? Right? Can you wear it? Right? Do you have a dagger? Do you practice deploying these weapons under a variety of conditions? Right? Like, for example, we talked about that Kata 3, right? It set up a specific scenario, right, where you're walking down the street and you're attacked by this dude. They train for that specific scenario, obviously, because that is something that happened. We should do that. Situational awareness, escalation of force, rules of engagement, right? This is stuff that's available today. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it in our own training, but it's something that you should be aware of if you're going to be doing a martial art, because you should try to figure out how that fit into the Middle Ages. Does everyone know who Jean Chandler is from Louisiana? He did a lot of research on social violence, right? And people were thinking that, well, this social violence, like escalation of force, where you start out with you can only hit with the flat. If someone escalates to the edge, now you can use the edge, and you can't thrust unless someone thrusts you, and you're like, oh shit, it's on, and you're thrusting, whatever, right? People thought that these were constraints, artificial constraints placed on violence, but they're not. What they are is channeling the natural constraints into a certain legal framework where they can evaluate who the asshole is, right, and who the person who is legitimately defending themselves is. So that all feeds into this. Like, we need to be aware of this. We need to do more with that research. We need to call John Chandler and say, dude, you are hugely important to us, right? Do more of this stuff. Give us more of this information. We need to figure out how it works with what we're doing. Multiple attackers, right? Some of us do that for fun, but we don't really, Montante guys, that's their thing, right? But us longsword people, our sword and buckler people, we don't really do that much, right? Mixed weapons, sword and buckler versus longsword, spear versus pole, or sword and buckler, or dagger versus this. Scenarios, right? Where you're defending yourself against 3 dudes and all you have is a dagger. All you have is a longsword, a dagger, and a guy with a spear coming at you, right? Anatomy, all this kind of stuff. Fighting from horseback, right? Now, Peter Osnerving was in the country for months, right? Doing horse stuff in Pennsylvania. He's going to be back, right? You can talk to Paris about that. You can have a chance to do this stuff that they did. You can do this from horseback.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's a real thing.
This is pretty much the end. These are some of the things we talked about, right? Holistic approach to training, factor in the social stuff, do a lot of research, know how your weapons work. Are there any questions? No questions. Okay, click, is that the end? Yes. Okay, thank you very much.